The dark blue Ford police SUV sat regally in front of the large wrought iron gates, its presence both commanding and commanding attention. The word police adorned the side like a badge of authority, the blue and red emergency lights glistening in the late afternoon sun. Yet, as the vehicle faced the viewer, there was an unsettling stillness that hung in the air, whispering of complications lurking behind the imposing gates. Officer Daniels climbed out of the SUV, the sound of the door creaking open breaking the silence. He adjusted his belt and surveyed the landscape, noting the lavishness of the mansion peeking through the tall, ornate gates. This wasn't just any call. This was an affluent area rarely touched by crime, yet he couldn't shake the sense of unease that coursed through him. "Strange, isn't it?" came a voice from behind him. It was Officer Gerald, his partner, stepping out from the shadows cast by the sprawling trees lining the driveway. He wore an expression that melded curiosity with concern. "Yes, strange indeed. What do you think they wanted us for?" Daniels replied, scanning the mansion, every window gazing back like eyes observing closely. "I heard reports of a disturbance. Sounds like something went down here last night," Gerald said, flipping through the notes on his notepad. "Just a few screams and ruckus, nothing detailed." "Not exactly the kind of report you'd expect from the Anderson estate," Daniels murmured, adjusting the collar of his uniform. He motioned towards the gates. "Let's check it out." Pushing open the heavy gates, the sound echoed like a warning, and as they stepped onto the manicured pathway leading to the mansion, unease intensified. The sunlight filtering through the trees danced across the pathway, yet an inexplicable chill hung in the air. They approached the double doors, each step weighted with anticipation. The mansion loomed above them, casting a shadow that felt heavy, almost suffocating. Daniels raised his hand to the ornate brass knocker, its intricate design almost mocking the tension swirling around them. With a decisive rap, he announced their presence. The door creaked open, revealing a woman who was exquisitely dressed, yet visibly shaken. Her pale complexion contrasted with her dark hair, and the subtle tremor in her voice gave away her distress. "Officers, thank you for coming. You have to help us." "What happened?" Daniels prompted, his mind racing with various scenarios. "There was an incident last night," she stammered, gripping the doorframe as though the weight of her words threatened to push her over the edge. "My husband, he's gone missing." "Missing?" Gerald echoed, stepping closer, his eyebrows knitting together. "Was there a struggle?" "There was shouting, and then I heard a crash. I thought he was playing a prank," she murmured, glancing back as if her memory haunted her. "But when I went to check, he was just gone. I thought he might have gone to the shed, but it's locked." "What shed?" Daniels demanded, his instincts kicking into high gear. "Show us." She hesitated, her gaze flickering between the two officers and the dark interior of the mansion. "You won't believe me if I tell you what's inside," she whispered. "Try us," Gerald said, his voice calm but firm. She drew in a shaky breath and nodded, leading them deeper into the mansion. Each step echoed the mounting tension, and the opulent decor began to feel more like a facade hiding something dark beneath the surface. In the expansive living room, the atmosphere shifted, shadows looming larger, while the sunlight struggled to penetrate the heaviness of the moment. Faded photos adorned the walls, capturing smiling faces that now felt out of place given the uncertainty thickening around them. "Here," she said, stopping before a heavy wooden door at the far end of the room. "This leads to the garden shed." Daniels carefully inspected the door, noting the heavy-duty lock seemingly untouched. "Is this where you last saw your husband?" he asked, his mind piecing together threads of a story untold. "Yes, but..." She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "He had something strange in there. Something he didn't want me to find out about." "Like what?" Gerald pressed, his curiosity piqued against the unease building in his gut. "I don't know, but he was acting different. More secretive," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought it was just work stress, but now I feel like I've lost him to something deeper." "Let's get this door open," Daniel said, breaking the tension rapidly rising. He pulled on a pair of gloves and moved forward, ready to take charge. As the lock clicked and the door swung open, an uneasy pull wrapped around him like a dark cloud. Inside, the dimly lit shed revealed an array of tools and equipment, but it was the small, covered object in the corner that grabbed his attention. A black tarp laid flat against the floor, its corners curling with an unsettling promise. "What is that?" Gerald's voice hinted at his growing apprehension. I don't know. He wouldn't let me inside," she stuttered, her hands shaking against the wooden frame. "Let's find out," Daniels said, stepping closer to the tarp. With a firm tug, he pulled it back, revealing a hidden surprise that rocked them to the core. Unfathomable secrets twisted within the depths of the shed, a sight that sent chills spiraling through him and offered no explanations for the woman's frightened eyes or her husband's inexplicable disappearance. "Call it in, Gerald," Daniels ordered, his heart pounding with foreboding. "We need backup. Something tells me this is just the beginning of a much darker puzzle." The unease they'd felt was no longer just a whisper. It had become a haunting presence, and as unexpected shadows began to creep into their thoughts, they realized they were entwined in a mystery far beyond their initial suspicions, spiraling into a darkness that might never see the light again. "Call it in, Gerald," Daniels ordered, his heart pounding with foreboding. He could feel the air around them thickening, an invisible grip tightening around the mystery unfolding inside the shed. The sight before them was unsettling, a dark stain on the tarp that sent a jolt of adrenaline rushing through him. Gerald fished his radio from his belt, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he tried to maintain composure. "This is Gerald," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We need backup at the Anderson estate. Possible foul play involved. Send for a detective unit and a forensics team." Daniels kept his eyes on the unsettling scene, the dark patch beneath the tarp whispering secrets he wasn't ready to confront. He could feel the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on him. What had happened to the missing husband, and how deep did this rabbit hole go? "Is this blood?" The woman's voice cracked, tears welling in her eyes, as she took a step closer. "Stay back," Daniels warned gently, turning his body to shield her from the shed's grim contents. Fear coursed through him. It was essential to keep her safe, even as questions spiraled in his mind. "We're handling this." Gerald finished his transmission and stepped beside Daniels. "We should secure the shed until the forensic team arrives. Can't let anyone in here to tamper with evidence." "Good idea," Daniels replied, nodding. They both stepped out and secured the door, doing their best to coat the scene in procedural protection. As they stepped away from the shed, the woman stood there shaking, fear intermingled with confusion swirling in her eyes. "My husband, he was so distant lately, but I never imagined." Her voice trailed off, lost in a tempest of fear and uncertainty. "Did he have any enemies?" Daniels asked, striving to keep the dialogue flowing and glean as much as he could while they waited. "I don't think so. Maybe, it's hard to say." She gathered her breath, her expression turning downcast. "He's a real estate developer. He has stressful projects, but most people just know him as a nice guy." "Stress can do funny things to people," Gerald interjected, trying to break the tension. "Did anything unusual happen in the days leading up to his disappearance? Strange visitors? Altercations?" The tremor in her voice resumed. "Just last week, an angry client came by. They had a huge argument, but it was about a project. I thought it was just business." "Do you remember this client's name?" Daniels pressed. "Caleb. Caleb Hargrove," she replied, her eyes narrowing as if grappling with the lingering memories. "He was upset about a development deal that fell through." "That sounds relevant," Gerald muttered, jotting notes in his pad. "We'll want to look into him." Just then, their radios crackled to life. "Units arriving at the Anderson estate in less than 5. Requesting confirmation on the situation." Daniels responded quickly. "Roger that. We need forensics and additional units. Possible foul play suspected in the husband's disappearance. Secure the area and keep questions to a minimum until the team arrives." "Copy that," came the reply, managing to soothe his nerves just a bit. The backup was arriving, but the deeper they delved into the mystery, the tighter the knot of unease coiled in his stomach. Do you think he's in danger? The woman asked, her voice faint. Daniels hesitated, weighing his words. We're going to figure this out. Just stay calm and let us do our job. But inside, the sense of foreboding pulsed stronger. Time was of the essence, and he could feel the weight of the seconds slipping away. Minutes later, a convoy of police vehicles pulled up, lights flashing and stirring an urgency into the atmosphere. Officer Daniels could see familiar faces emerging from the cars. The lead detective, a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Collins, and a couple of forensic team members equipped with evidence bags and cameras. Daniels, Gerald, Collins greeted them, her demeanor shifting immediately into that of a seasoned professional. What do we have? Possible foul play related to a missing person, Daniels began, gesturing towards the shed. The husband's nowhere to be found. We believe we might have just uncovered evidence tied to his disappearance. Collins stepped forward, her gaze flicking to the woman before landing on the flaps of the shed. I'm going to need a comprehensive rundown, she said firmly. Let's get this secured, and then you can fill me in. While the forensic team approached the shed, Daniels and Gerald took Collins aside, conveying the details as concisely as possible. The woman stood nearby, an island of anxiety in a sea of professional urgency. First things first, Collins said, her focus unwavering. What's the name of the missing husband? Richard Anderson. The woman piped up, her voice barely a whisper now. Please find him. Through the metal exterior of the shed, a mixture of doubt, fear, and an unassuming dread began to seep in. As the forensic team entered, the atmosphere tightened, shifting from hopeful inquiry to something darker. The world they had known at that moment began stripping itself away, revealing the unsettling truths lying beneath the surface. With each passing second, Daniels felt the churn of uncertainty grow stronger. What secrets had Richard Anderson carried? What dark ties had he forged within this intricate web surrounding his seemingly perfect life? The questions were endless, but one thing was clear. The truth would soon unravel, and it might lead them down a path from which there was no return. With each passing second, Daniels felt the churn of uncertainty grow stronger. What secrets had Richard Anderson carried? What dark ties had he forged within this intricate web surrounding his seemingly perfect life? The questions were endless, but one thing was clear. The truth would soon unravel, and it might lead them down a path from which there was no return. Collins gestured toward the shed, signaling the forensic technician to proceed with caution. Let's get some photos and test the area for DNA. I want to know what we're dealing with, she ordered confidently, already in tune with the gravity of the situation. As the technicians stepped inside, flashlights flickered, illuminating the dim corners of the shed. The tension was palpable, and they all stood anxiously awaiting the verdict, each heartbeat reverberating with the unsettling silence that surrounded them. Moments felt like hours. Suddenly, one of the technicians called out, "Detective Collins, you'll want to see this." A quiet gasp filled the air, and before they could process what it meant, Collins was at their side, peering down at what lay before them. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, her voice steady but low. The technician nodded, carefully lifting a small object from beneath the debris, a blood-stained wristwatch, familiar yet haunting. "It's Richard Anderson's watch." The engraved initials confirm it. Daniels placed a hand on the shed frame, a wave of nausea washing over him. "What's it doing here?" he murmured, his voice thick with dread. It felt like an omen, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to click into place, but the picture they formed was nothing short of disturbing. The technician continued, "The blood matches the traces found on the tarp. Preliminary tests indicate it is indeed human." "More than likely, Richard's blood," Gerald added, his face turning pale. "What about evidence for a struggle?" Collins asked, keeping her composure even as the atmosphere darkened around them. "There are signs of a scuffle," the technician reported. "Look here, scrapes on the floor and footprints leading out of the shed. They've been masked over, but are still visible." "Then he wasn't just taken," Daniels said, piecing together the fragments of the night's events. "He must have fought back." "Right, which means he might still be alive," Gerald interjected, hope tinging his voice despite the escalating tension. We need to track down those footprints. They lead somewhere. Let's work fast, Collins commanded, the urgency of the moment weaving itself into the very fabric of the investigation. Get a team to follow those tracks. Meanwhile, we'll continue questioning the wife. They turned back towards the woman, who stood alone, her face pale and eyes wide, a fragile figure racked with worry. "What did you find?" she asked, beseeching with desperation. Daniels felt a surge of empathy, but knew they had to remain professional. "We've found Richard's watch, and there's evidence of a struggle in the shed. We believe he may have put up a fight, but we need more information from you. Anything else you can think of that might help." She hesitated, searching deep within herself for answers as tears brimmed in her eyes. "I wish I'd paid better attention," she murmured. "I noticed a strange car parked outside a few nights ago, but I thought nothing of it at the time. It was an old sedan, dark-colored. Couldn't make out the make, but it was suspicious." "Did you see anyone get out?" Gerald pressed, his notepad poised and ready.
"No.
But I remember it stuck out to me because it wasn't parked like the other cars. It was just waiting," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mention it before because I thought it was nothing." "Every detail matters," Collins emphasized, noting it down. "Can you remember which nights it was there?" "Only a day or two before he went missing. I think it was 2 nights back," she replied, swallowing a lump in her throat. "I feel so guilty for not mentioning it sooner." "Don't blame yourself," Daniels reassured her, though guilt weighed heavily on his own conscience. "We're going to find him. We just need you to remember everything." As the frantic pace of the investigation escalated, they regrouped with the forensic team, gathering details that pointed toward a deeper mystery than they'd expected, a dangerous web of connections tied into the dark underbelly of the affluent neighborhood. With Richard's last known whereabouts pointing to a lead, the search began expanding beyond the mansion into the layers of deceit lurking in plain sight. "Let's head out," Collins instructed, urgency electrifying her tone. "We'll start with checking for cameras down the street. If that car was here, someone might have seen something." In the rapidly sinking sunlight, they split into teams and set off, Daniels and Gerald taking the lead. As they roamed down the street, they caught sight of a familiar figure, a neighbor seated on her porch, a classic front-row seat to the happenings of the neighborhood. "Excuse me, ma'am," Daniels called, approaching with caution. "We're with the police. We're looking for information about a dark sedan that may have been parked around here a couple of nights ago." The woman looked up, a flicker of recognition darting across her face. "Oh, yes. I saw that car. It was parked for a while, but left just around midnight. I remember because it was so unusual." "Did you notice who was inside?" Gerald pressed, anticipation rising within him. She squinted, as if recalling distant details. "I didn't see anyone who stood out, but there was a man who walked by close to that time. He seemed nervous, looking over his shoulder as he passed." "Can you describe him?" Daniels asked, his heart picking up a beat. "Tall, with dark hair. He wore a black jacket. I thought he was just a jogger at first, but he was sweating like he'd been running from something," she replied, her brow furrowing with concern. "Thank you," Daniels said as they jotted down her recollections, their hope igniting further with every scrap of information they gathered. "You've been very helpful. If you remember anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out." With that, they took off toward the nearest traffic surveillance cameras, intent on piecing together the puzzle and uncovering the truth behind the dark sedan, the man who looked over his shoulder, and the shadows looming over Richard Anderson's fate. As the sun dipped lower, swallowing the landscape into an embrace of darkness, Daniels felt the suspense of the story stretching onward, yearning to resolve with each twist. This case was far from over, and the realization crept into their hearts that it demanded their utmost attention, for the truth, whatever it may be, was lurking just beyond the reach of the light. As the sun dipped lower, swallowing the landscape into an embrace of darkness, Daniels felt the suspense of the story stretching onward, yearning to resolve with each twist. This case was far from over, and the realization crept into their hearts that it demanded their utmost attention, for the truth, whatever it may be, was lurking just beyond the reach of the light. They arrived at the precinct and gathered around the surveillance footage from the nearest intersection. Tension lingered in the air as they reviewed the clips, fast-forwarding through the mundane foot traffic of the afternoon. But as the minutes ticked by, impatience began to simmer. "There!" Gerald suddenly exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "Rewind it a bit. That car, doesn't it look like the sedan she described?" Daniels leaned closer, his heart racing as he caught sight of the dark vehicle pulling into view, framed against the dusky backdrop. With a few clicks, Collins brought the image into clarity, a weathered black sedan creeping along the street at precisely the time the neighbor had mentioned. "This could be our lead," Collins said, her voice low and serious. "Let's see who's driving it." As they refined the video, the fuzzy pixels gave way to clear details. A figure emerged behind the wheel, turning slightly toward the lens. The man's face was partially obscured, but the directional lighting illuminated the sharp lines of his profile, a flash of familiarity igniting in Danielle's mind. "Wait, pause it there," he urged, and they all squinted at the image. The man's dark hair and distinctive jawline struck a chord deep within him. He recognized that face. "Is that Caleb Hargrove?" Gerald asked, narrowing his eyes skeptically, unable to shake off the unsettling implications. "The client who got into an altercation with Richard?" "Start running a background on him," Collins ordered. "We need everything on file, addresses, past complaints, anything linking him to Anderson. If my theory checks out, we might turn this case on its head." As the team scrambled for details, the gravity of their findings weighed heavily upon them. The pieces were falling into place: a watch in the shed, a car lingering, and a nervous man at the scene. Yet, beneath that surface clarity lurked an unsettling undercurrent, a shroud of danger encasing their investigation. The hours stretched into a tense silence filled only by the clicks of keyboards and the murmurs of urgent conversations. As the evening crept toward night, both anticipation and dread gripped each member of the team, marking the air with an unnerving sense of what could lie ahead. Finally, the forensics team returned with an initial analysis. "We found fingerprints on the watch that match Caleb's," one of the technicians announced, sliding a file folder across the table. "We also recovered traces of blood from Richard. It all adds up, there's no doubting it." "This is a solid lead," Collins stated, her gaze hardened with determination. "Enough to bring him in and question him further. But we need to tread carefully." "Where do we find him?" Daniels asked, the urgency resetting the atmosphere. He felt a rising hope, despite the churning uncertainty above them. "Last known address is a condo downtown," Gerald informed them, with pages flipping in frantic sequence. "We can get a couple of cruisers there tonight." As they prepared their gear and headed out, Daniels felt the momentum lift. They were on a trajectory toward something significant, and finally, it seemed they were closing in on the truth. But with every piece they unveiled, a more profound darkness threatened to take hold. As the team drove toward the condo, they went over the details, adrenaline coursing through them. "Let's stick to protocol," Collins reiterated. "Approach with caution. We have no idea how far he's willing to go to protect his secrets." Arriving at the dimly lit building, they parked out of sight, scanning the area for any signs of Hargrove. Shadows loomed, and streetlights flickered in the cool evening air as they gathered in a tight huddle. "Daniels, Gerald, if Hargrove appears, I want you two to take the lead," Collins instructed, her voice echoing the seriousness of the moment. "If he makes a move to run, don't hesitate. We need him alive for questioning." They moved through the building corridors stealthily, scanning the numbers on doors. As they approached the right apartment, the air grew thick with tension. Just then, a flicker of movement caught Danielle's eye, a dark silhouette darting past their periphery. "Hold," he called out, adrenaline surging as he rushed forward, Gerald not far behind. But as they reached the door to Hargrove's condo, it swung open. "Caleb Hargrove," Collins barked, brandishing her badge. "You're under investigation in connection to Richard Anderson's disappearance." For a moment, the world held its breath, the collective tension rising to its peak. Hargrove's wide-eyed panic spoke volumes as he took an instinctive step back, his face draining of color. I didn't mean to, he began, his words tumbling over themselves as he stumbled back. It was clear he'd been cornered, desperation mingling with fear. Don't move, Gerald shouted, taking a step toward him just as Hargrove's eyes darted to the window and broke into a sprint. After him, Collins barked, adrenaline surging in tandem with their heart rates as they pursued him down the stairs and out into the night. The chase plunged them into the cold, moonlit streets, a frantic dash weaving between alleyways and parked cars as they pressed on. Hargrove's breathless gasps echoed eerily, growing distant with each stride. Daniels, around the corner, Gerald shouted, his voice sharp against the din of the city. They rounded the corner just in time to see Hargrove leap over a low fence. Stop, Daniels yelled, but there was no time for hesitation as he vaulted the fence behind him. They skidded to a stop in the alley, only to see Hargrove taking off into a wider street. But it was there, in that fleeting moment, that the strange, prophetic feeling of unease tugged deep within Daniels. Everything felt elastic, the precarious balance of their chase hinging on a thin veneer of control. Daniels and Gerald burst into the street, their footfalls pounding against the pavement. But as they raced forward, desperation gave way to something even more primal. Just ahead, Caleb Hargrove turned sharply, throwing himself into the parking lot of a nearby convenience store. Panic-stricken, he dodged between cars while glancing over his shoulder. Daniels felt the adrenaline surge through him, laser-focused, ready to bring this to a close. But then, without warning, Hargrove stumbled to a halt, his eyes widening at something hidden just beyond the glow of the street lamp. "No!" he cried out, throwing his hands up in hopeless defeat. That moment unraveled like a thread, revealing the truth that no one wanted to acknowledge.
What?
What is it? Daniels called, his heart racing with confusion and urgency, ready to leap into action. But as Hargrove turned toward him, a twisted smile on his face, the atmosphere shifted entirely. "You think you have it all figured out?" he taunted, the air thickening with dread. "You have no idea what you're getting into. Stop. Get on the ground," Daniels shouted, realizing the danger written across Hargrove's features, a flicker of threat lurking behind his bravado. But in that brief moment of hesitation, the world fell apart. Hargrove pulled something from his jacket, a glint of metal that shimmered in the moonlight. "Get back," Gerald barked, throwing himself between Daniels and Hargrove just as the chaos erupted, the truth spiraling into the shadows of the night, and with it, the fear that they had descended into a much darker game than they had ever anticipated. The chase had led them here, and the question now loomed heavily. Were they truly ready for the darkness that awaited, or had they unintentionally stepped into a trap from which there might be no escape? In the heart of the city, beneath the unforgiving night sky, fate played its final hand. And this was only the beginning.